Thank you. But the one who looks down is also looking down on himself and limiting everything around him. He is not seeing what is obvious because he's so feeling sorry for himself. He's so feeling so small that everything outside becomes separate and threatening. We understand? Is it any clearer now, talking about the will of God? How beautiful it is. Yes, everything is the will of God. Nothing happens outside of God. Do you have any questions? Let us go into it, okay?
So is it then our interpretation that causes
our limited seeing, which is
grief
interpretation. I'm using another
Yes.
word here because it is, you're right, it is our interpretation. But our interpretation is based on our ability to see love. When people talk about waking up or growing in consciousness, nothing is happening. Awakening is the now itself. But what is actually happening is that you're beginning to see more and more love, more and more love, more and more beauty, more and more grandeur. You're seeing more and more God everywhere you see. You see? Everywhere you look. Until suddenly you see nothing but the face of God everywhere, which is love. You see it in the animal, and the child, and the old man, and the old woman, in the poor, and the not poor. You see it everywhere. Because now your eyes have opened, your heart has opened, and now you're beginning to see with your heart instead of your mind. Your mind is made up of conditioning, okay? But mind is a wonderful thing. Because mind, the grand mind is what created the universe. Is what created the body. You see? See, that's the beautiful thing.
Burt, can I ask you something?
Oh, of course.
I'm remembering a quote by Buddha that said, "Suffering exists, but there is no one who suffers."
That's right.
So can you talk a little bit about it?
Yes, yes. First of all, I love Buddha, so you see I've got pictures everywhere of Buddha, just like Ramana Maharshi. Buddha never mentioned the word God.
Yes.
And never mentioned the word soul. And the reason I feel, okay, is because he didn't want people to start seeing something outside of themselves. You are the Buddha, you see. So Buddha means enlightened. Buddha is the enlightened one. His name was Gautama, who became enlightened. Okay, so he said suffering is all that you see, suffering is all around you. He became aware of that because he was a prince. He went out into outside the palace and saw suffering, and he wanted to know what is suffering. And he says, I won't stop until I wake up and know the truth. Okay, which he did. But when he woke up, he saw there's no creator, there's no creation, everything is nirvana. And that was his whole philosophy, his whole teaching. After that, it was embellished by a lot of other stuff. Okay? So no one suffers. I'll give you an example, a very, very specific example. Ram Dass, you've heard of Ram Dass?
Yes.
Okay, in the 60s he was absolutely famous. He started many trends, many spiritual paths, meditations, etc. Ram Dass, his name was Richard Alpert, he was a psychologist. But he was very exploratory, he was a beautiful man, he just wanted to know the truth, and he started experimenting with LSD. But he was a psychologist at Harvard University. What was Harvard, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Harvard, right. And because of that, because experimenting with LSD, and he wanted to know, have experiences, he went to India and all that. He was fired from being a psychologist. And then he became a guru. He became a disciple of someone whose name I forgot, Baba something. Anyway, now this is my point. Now when he went to India in order to explore and find out more, he arrived in Benares. And Benares is a city that you have to hold your nose because it stinks, you know, with activity and smell and people and everything else. So that was his great shock. The second shock he had is he saw all those people in the street, actually some of them dying from starvation. Some were so emaciated, so poor, so ragged, you know, and he saw all that suffering and he said, oh my God. He went to the hotel and started throwing up. And then he stopped for a moment and he says, my God, I'm judging these people by the outer appearance. He went out again to make himself experience it. That's how beautiful he was and still is. He had a stroke a few years ago, but he's still beautiful. And to experience it, and what he saw changed his life. He saw emaciated Indians, he saw suffering, he saw people dying, but he looked into their eyes and he found peace. None of them were afraid of dying. None of them were feeling sorry for themselves. None of them had an ego. And this is in the poorest part of Benares, where he stayed in a hotel. So this was quite something, and it's revealing. He says, my goodness, I come from the West. I have many cars, I have a big house. You know, we have wealth, we have everything. I'm a psychologist, I'm a professor. And he says, but I've got nothing. These people know more than I do, because they have found peace. You see, and that's what changed his mind. So when we go to Buddha, and we talk about Buddha, yeah, Buddha said there is suffering. He saw suffering everywhere. Everybody was suffering, because everybody is searching, everybody is seeking. Everybody is seeking answers. But then, when he went, and he said, now I'm going to sit under this Bodhi tree, after years and years and years of starvation, struggling, and self-punishment, because he didn't know how to find truth. Suddenly he sat under the Bodhi tree and he said, I'm going to sit here. If I don't get enlightened, I'll fall, I'll die. I don't eat, I won't drink or anything. And there are many pictures where he was, you know, had visions of, you know, dancing nude themselves and food and drink and everything else to take him out of that state. He wouldn't budge. He was so determined, his intention was so determined to actually wake up that he did. The next time he opened his eyes, and I don't know whether they said how long he stayed there, but when he opened his eyes, he woke up, he became the Buddha. And he was immediately recognized. And that's how much light he emanated from that realization. You see? And then his teaching was the Four Noble Truths. Okay? Yes, there is suffering, but there is a way out of suffering, and that is knowing the truth of your nature. You see? That everything that seems to be suffering is ignorance, is unawareness of your true nature. When Ramana Maharshi was dying, this picture was taken just before he died. He passed away. He had cancer. His arm was infesting his whole body. And they wanted to cut off his arm so that he survived, you know. And he said, we want to save you. He said, what for? I'm always here. Where can I go? Because he was everything. He was everywhere. When people looked into his eyes, they never saw suffering. They saw nothing but innocence, beauty, love, kindness. You see? So this is what Buddha was saying. I don't know whether I made it clear or not, but it's true that when we look at suffering, and we really look at it through witnessing, for example, we said, hey, it's not as bad as I thought it was. What was really suffering is, I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid of this being all the time, or something like this. You see what I mean? It's psychological. The real suffering that we go through as humans is psychological. Never the thing itself that we think is making us suffer.
It's like the separation causes that.
Yes.
I mean, it is that.
Beautiful. The separation causes that and is that. Yeah, separation is all suffering. There is no separation in anything. You see, but that is something that, you know, like for example, Ramana Maharshi appeared to me. Okay, that's how I started. I was a physiotherapist at the time. I know I told you the story, but It's apropos right now. And because he appeared to me, I thought I was hallucinating because I was studying psychology at the time too. So psychologists, everything is hallucination, imagination, which in a way is true. 6 months down the road, I see his picture on the cover of a book. And then I thought, oh my God, this is real. This is true. And from then on, my intention was to quit my physiotherapy work, go inside, take up a very cheap apartment, a basement apartment in Toronto, and just meditate and chant his name. That's all I wanted to do. But I did that for 27 years. And I never knew what I'm telling you now. You see, because because I still believed that it's not that I believed suffering is real. What am I getting at? Is when I realized the truth was so simple, so simple. It didn't require study. It didn't require hours of meditation, although meditation is the very nature of the moment. But all it was is now, this moment. That's it. It became so clear. There's only now. And to now, there's no exit. Right? It never ends. So anything that so all this suffering is because 95% of the time, sometimes as much as 99% of the time, we are never here. We're thinking about what the next step is going to be, what we're going to do next, what's this happen, what I have to do now. I have to look at my cell phone. What's going to happen? This is a habit that most people are getting to. And or for example, we think about the past. You see, oh, I'm afraid maybe I'm not. Something is going to happen to me. You know, I'm having these beliefs or these things coming to me. But you know, when you are totally in the moment, without the past because the past is gone, without the future because the future is not yet. You're totally here, present. Okay? That's what enlightenment is. So waking up is not something that's going to happen in the future. It is already now, but you're missing it because you're thinking that awakening is going to happen
when you get it.
When you get it. It's there. It's right there. It's now, right, even now, as you hear me talk. You're awakened. This moment is it. But the mind goes back into the past and into the future. But if you see that now has no past and future, now is always now. Always now. Now has never changed. For the last few billion years that we've been human, it's the same now that it was then. But what do? We think that awakening is going to be not now, sometime, which is not now. And that's why we keep missing it and it never happens. And that's what seeking does. Seeking is always going someplace other than this moment, right here, right now, this second. You see, and we miss it. And it took me 27 years to actually see something so simple. It's here, it's now. I've always been awakened. I thought I wasn't because I thought I am Burt doing this, doing that, and I've got goals, and I've got, you see what I mean? Always very, very active. And I missed, see? And I missed the very thing that I am. That I always was.
So it's like the lack, always seeking the lack.
We're always seeking the lack.
Because it's the lack.
Yeah, but why? Why do we seek it? Why do we seek something that makes us suffer?
To be right.
Very good. That's why I had you, which you read it well. That's the letter there.
Could we read that again?
You want to hear it again?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Could you please? Yeah.
Dear Burt, I had a realization about the issue that I've been dealing with that we talked about on Skype. That is, somehow I am enjoying to punish myself for feeling guilty. I do accept fully that I am punishing myself because of the guilt that I created inside of me, but I never understood how could I find the joy in it. because to me it felt like a very awful experience. That is, how could I be enjoying my suffering so much? Then it came to me that what is going on is that by my suffering, I was proving myself to be right about what is going on. And the need to be right superseded even my need to get better, recover, and save my own life. Wow, that was a big one. That is now what I know. It is true that my need to be right, and especially having my way, will always mean suffering, because it would be controlling everyone and everything around, which is totally out of my control. And it would drain every drop of my energy, as it has been doing until now.
Why do we have so many diseases like fatigue syndrome, nervous breakdowns, anxiety attacks? Why do these things happen? Aren't they obvious? Why?
No ease.
No ease, but disease. We have to be in control. You see?
Which is a result of the fear.
Exactly. Exactly. So, are we clear now? There's only the will of God, which is love and love. God is love, the will is love. It covers it all. There's only love, nothing else but love. If there is no love, there is no meaning, there is nothing. You see? There's only emptiness, loneliness, and fear. But that doesn't mean these things exist. What exists is love. But if we don't understand love, if we don't grow in love, we feel deprived. We feel alone. You see? But you can never be alone. Because everything is you. There's nothing but you. Wherever you go, there you are. No matter how far you go, wherever you are, there you are. I'm glad I enjoy my own jokes. So are there any questions then, or is that clear? The will of God is really, you see, he spoke from great wisdom, but he couldn't explain it in detail this long, you know. One time he was interviewed in a magazine. Yeah, What is Enlightenment? Did you ever read a magazine? What is Enlightenment? I don't think it's being published anymore, but it used to be great in the beginning. Anyway, there was a complete, I think 7 full-page article on Ramesh Balsekar, you know, and there was an interview. And this interviewer was so perplexed, you know, like there's only the will of God, and he kept repeating, and it gave examples. But at the end, this writer who wrote the article got it. He went into a cafe, stopped and had a coffee. And as he was sipping the coffee, he looked around and he saw there was no one having a coffee. Just him playing as that child, as that man or that woman selling him the coffee. He was everything at that moment. He just had, by the grace of Balsekar, and he was with him and interviewing him for a couple of hours about the will of God, he became imbued with that will, you see, and for a moment he had this spark. He's such a beautiful writer. The way he wrote it is beautiful. I kept the magazine, but I have to look for it. Anyway, so what I'm saying here is that the mind cannot understand it. The mind will say, yes, the will of God is everything, or no, it cannot be. You see, but there is no such thing as yes or no. In truth, in reality, both opposites are one. Everything is one. When we start feeling that oneness beyond good and bad, right and wrong, should or shouldn't, right, you know, or yes or no, when we begin to see everything is that, imperfection is also perfection, because nothing is outside of that beauty of love. The moment we begin to see that, okay, something awakens in you. Your mind stops, because it cannot think anymore. It cannot reach anything anymore. It cannot understand anymore. You stop. Well, the moment you stop, the heart opens. You see? When the heart opens, you see things you could never have seen by anyone explaining anything. See? So that is the whole point. Your heart understands what I'm saying now. And if you don't try to figure it out, and don't try to think about it, but feel it, you might have some glimpses, I can guarantee it. Because that's how I get my glimpses too. I don't think about it, but I feel it. I just stay with it, you see? And then it starts to come. It starts to come from its silence, from the depth of being, you see? And everything is being. And it contains it all, because oneness, which is love, contains it all. All. Now let's talk about pain, depression, anger, fear, anxiety, jealousy. Okay? Are these things wrong and shouldn't be? Say what you feel.
They're necessary.
They are necessary, aren't they? Because they are catalysts for growth. When we start looking at them. If we resist them, if we deny them, then they get more powerful, of course, because we're feeding them reality when they are not real at all. But if we start looking at them, what are they really? What is it really? You know, you look at them, you'll find there's beauty in that too. There's love in that too. Because it is all a seeking of love. It is all a needing of love. All of it. You know, all you ever want is to be approved of, to be loved, to be caressed, to be told I love you, to feel welcome, to feel okay. This is all we ever want. But if that's what everybody wants, it means that is the truth of being, isn't it? And if it's the truth of being, be that. You see, the moment you be that, and don't seek it, just be that. The moment you become that, then everything is clear. And you see beauty in everything. Everything.
And how do you get out of that? How do people get out of that when they're always seeking outside?
And then they have to see that there is no outside. There is only isness, which is consciousness. Now when we think of outside, of course we're thinking of the body. Okay? But you are not the body. The body is inside you. How many of you understand what I just said? You're not inside the body. The body is inside you. Explain what I just said. What it means.
You is bigger than the body.
Hmm?
You is bigger than the body.
Exactly. You are everything, and you're just appearing as this right now. You see? You are. You just are. You are consciousness, totality. But you're appearing as a form. And that's beautiful. You can still play in being personal. You still can play being a unique person. But in truth, you know that you're much more than that. You see? That's what happened to Dr. Eben Alexander. He was a brain surgeon. He was an incredible man, brilliant man. And he kept saying, you know, consciousness comes from the brain and blah, blah, blah. And he gave courses and everything else. And now you can buy his book from Banyan, and it's called Proof of Heaven. One day he died. He went into a coma. And he lost his brain. His brain died completely. Have you read the book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The brain was completely dead. He came back and he said, God is real. And everything is love. All is love. All is that oneness. You see? And he talks about how and then he said something very interesting. He said, now that I am back in the physical body looking at the world, this is a dream. Where I was is real. You know? And he said it so well. So anyway, so so this is the whole point. So when he was outside the body, there was no brain, there were no senses, yet he experienced everything fully. Sound like he never heard before, sights that he never saw before. He experienced a totality that he never even thought was possible. But now he's in the body. He did a good job, though, right? I mean, the way he
Well,
wrote
he
it.
was completely brain dead and he still had awareness.
Yeah,
Total
he had
consciousness.
total consciousness. Yeah, which proves that the brain is a tool of consciousness, not the other way around. You see, we cannot die because we never existed. Now there is another point. You see, we think we're going to die. How can we die when we never existed? You are consciousness. You see? You appear to exist because of consciousness. And consciousness keeps your heart beating, circulating, the body functioning. The body is a wonderful, wonderful instrument. You know, and you can get to know it and love it. And you can love everything. And then you realize you're so much more than the body. Because the body is constantly changing. If somebody asks me, who are you, Burt? And I can say, well, I am Burt, and I am this body. But then I know I am lying. First of all, my real name was Alberto Vassallo Harding, amabile amato felice fortunato. That was the original name that I was given in the birth certificate. And then I called myself Burt. It's short, B-U-R-T. But you see, I was born with that name. My certificate proves it's a very long name. Like sometimes Spanish, they do that too. Okay? But, so the name, I'm a different name. The body, oh my goodness, my body, I look at pictures when I was Mr. Eastern Canada, and it had nothing to do with me now. And so different, totally different. So who am I? Am I the body? Of course not. Who I am is indescribable. Who I am is really you. But it still carries, and this is, see, it is self-recognizing. That is the mystery. How Christ can live in each heart, and each heart thinks it is it who is being aware. Isn't that something? Mm-hmm. That is the greatest miracle. You see? Anyway, are there any questions at all? Yeah.
I have a question about the collective consciousness. Like, are we attached to that?
Well, we are, you see, consciousness has many derivations, okay? For example, there's global collective consciousness, and that's the dimension, the third dimension moving to the fourth dimension, that is global. And then there is national collective consciousness, where each country has its own consciousness. So if they think poorly, they're going to be poor. Dictators usually live in very poor countries who create their own laws of wanting to be right and controlling and create suffering. But that's a collective consciousness, okay? So each country has its own consciousness. Canada has its own, the States has its own consciousness. And then there are group consciousnesses where, you know, like people meet as groups. For example, we have similar consciousness. We come to satsang, you see. Then there are other groups who have a different state of consciousness. So consciousness is very, very varied, okay? But nothing is better or worse. Nothing is good or right or wrong or anything like that. Consciousness plays all these roles. And then there are parallel universes, parallel worlds. For example, I live in a very beautiful world because I want to. Okay, when I get up in the morning, I talk to the Holy Spirit and I see everything as beautiful. And I feel very much alive. But one day, I had to go to Hastings. One time I took the bus there because I sold my car, so I went there to have my passport renewed. And when I was in Hastings, I haven't been there for many, many years. And I saw an incredible, another collective, another world. Another world, you know, full of drunks in the street, you know, and poor people. And the consciousness is so poor, a lot of prostitutes running around. And I thought, my goodness, this is another world. And this is still Vancouver, though. You see? So, yes, everything has its own collective consciousness, which is also a parallel universe, a parallel world. You see? Living in the same. Now, some people says, look at all the suffering, look at all the terrible things that are happening, because they listen to the news and they read the paper all the time. They're living in that collective world. They live in the world of crime and corruption and money problems, and time is money, and all this. And then they wonder why they're negative. Well, of course they're negative. They're living in that world. And that's their consciousness. And the consciousness produces the world that you see in your mind. So if you want to see only God, then you'll see only God. Read only God, feel only God, talk only God. You see? And when you do that, what happens is you live in that world, in a heavenly world. Now you might say, but that's not realistic. Are you kidding? Even if you're poor, you're taken care of. And these are facts that you cannot prove until you start living that life. Because when you live with love, and you think only love and nothing else but love, then everything is supplied you. Everything comes. You see? There is a magic in it. There is a force, a power that we cannot explain.
Reminds me of the story of Jesus and feeding the masses, right? That's how there was always bread.
There's always bread, there's always, He sent out his disciples one time and he said, go and preach, but don't throw pearls among swine. Okay, you know what that means. It means if people are not ready for the pearls that you have to give, don't bother. You know, keep those pearls. You know, don't throw them away, because they're jewels of wisdom. But he said, okay, Jesus, we're going to go away and we're starting to preach the gospel, you know, of love. Because that's what Jesus actually taught. You know, the Bible misconstrued many of the teachings of Jesus. He taught only love. But when they went, they said, but we have nothing to give. And he says, if you got 2 shirts, give one. And you'll always have another one to take its place. And it's so true. Did you ever go into your closet and you find you've got so much stuff that you never use, and you decide to give it away or go to Salvation Army or whatever, and all of a sudden you start buying new stuff and the money comes? Almost like the replacement, yeah. When you get rid of something, you get, you know, you have to make room. You see, that's Feng Shui too, incidentally. You've heard of Feng Shui? Okay, that's also Feng Shui, yeah. You create a system in which when you decide whatever any changes that you make will bring even more discovery, more creativity into your life. You see? So this is it. So we are constantly giving love all the time, all the rules. Give, because when you give, you get. You see? More will come to you as you give. But when you become very poor and separate and you're afraid to give because you're insecure, then the insecurity increases. Because when you try to hold on to what you have, then you find you start losing it and you're not gaining anything new. You see, this is the same with the mind that, well, Albert Einstein said. He says, never bring your own mind into something. Think something new. I think I can. You quote it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what he said exactly? The words.
You can't solve a problem with your to try and think your way out of a problem. That wasn't the exact words, but.
No, no, you cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
In other words, if you need to solve a problem, you've got to go beyond the thinking that produced the problem in the first place. You've got to think deeper and vaster. You see what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, so is that clear how the will of God creates everything, is everything, and there's nothing else but that? Now when we hear the word, the will of God, we're thinking will, belonging to God, being out there. Are we seeing that? It is you I'm talking about. The will of God is you. It is love. But we separate, and that's where we make the mistake. And then we say, oh, I'm confused. What did he talk about?
That was a quote I read this morning, which was,
Yeah?
the will and love of God is proved by your own existence.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And actually, when you start looking around, you see it everywhere. You see love everywhere. My goodness. Now, your body, like for example, you fall, you scratch. Immediately, 3 days later, it's healed. Oh, who did it?